Hello to anyone who's watching. Um, this is Alistair Gentry doing a very unconventional lunchtime lecture. This isn't going to look and sound like one of the normal ones. I have been given the keys to the kingdom, so I'm in the ODI's YouTube account. So yeah, I'm just going to basically fill some time, give a chance for a few people to join and watch if they want to. So you can ask me any questions in the live chat, or you can go to the ODI's Twitter account, which is uses the hashtag ODI Fridays, ODIFRIDAYS. Otherwise, yeah, I'm just going to give it a minute. Yeah, it is the new reality. So yeah, we're trying something new. We're trying to do a lecture remotely without me being there. So yeah, just going to give it, about another 20 seconds. This is also going to be recorded, so you don't have to watch it live. Yeah, no, this is super weird. I never wanted to be a YouTuber, but here I am. Yeah, and again, like as a really crude measure, I'm just gonna show you some slides on the screen. Is that backwards? It looks backwards to me. Maybe you can have some backwards slides. You're not going to be able to read them anyway. They're just mainly for me. So yeah, I'm gonna just make a start. Oh, okay. I'm being told it's not backwards, so that's good. It's only backwards. It's me that's backwards. Yeah, my name is Alistair Gentry. I've been research artist in residence at the Open Data Institute in London, which is a non-profit organisation which is dedicated to free, not necessarily free in terms of monetary, but free, equitable kind of access to the world of data that accretes around all of us now, and that is all a very big part of all of our lives. Yeah, just to go back really quickly, I started there about a year ago, a bit more than a year ago, and I was there working with the team, researching a new work, which I'll talk about a bit in a little while. Some of the things that generally interest me are these things. I do lectures, performance lectures. LARP, for those of you that don't know, is live action role playing. Not so much with the foam swords, but in terms of creating situations for people in which they can experience a kind of alternate reality and step out a little bit of their normal lives. I'm really interested in the rituals in our lives and irrationality, of which obviously there's a lot of that going around right now with people panic buying and kind of creating a situation of stress for a lot of people other than themselves, which is not necessary. So it's really interesting to me how that kind of mass hysteria kind of takes hold very quickly. Really interested in institutions and authority, and I use satire and kind of humour a lot in my work. I did this show called Magical Realism, which was about that. It's about like a previous period of, mass hysteria in English culture. In this case, kind of the paranoia about Catholics and Catholic terrorism, and it's based on the magic of and the science of John Dee, the court magician of Elizabeth I. I did this show in Sight Gallery called Hunter Moon, which was doing readings for people, like a kind of tarot card reading, but with blank cards and an Argos catalogue to kind of probe their minds using those tools. This is a show I did called the Portland Office for Imaginary History, which, as the name suggests, is a totally fictitious tourist information office. So one of the things that interested me to begin with was, it's gone sideways, Wizard of Oz AI, which is not a term that I invented, but it's a term that's come into use for a lot of the services that look like they're very high tech and look like they're artificial intelligence, but are actually still the same old thing. They're lots of low paid workers, often in the developing world, sitting in the background and doing the work that is being claimed to be, collective intelligence, artificial intelligence. you name it. But yeah, very often, there's been the big scandal recently of voice assistants, which have turned out to be not doing as much background AI processing as they claimed. In many cases, again, it's people sitting there listening to your recordings in order to action them and to improve them. So I came up with another name for this, which is tech drag. So the work I've done here, DoxBox, is a little bit draggy as well, in the sense that it's kind of playing with androgyny and a kind of bit of a kind of queer aesthetic. But tech drag is also it's enacting the traits of technology without actually being technology, which is not a new thing. It's been going on for a long time. Some of you may know about the Mechanical Turk, which was a chess-playing automaton, supposedly, which was really a pretend automaton which had a person hidden inside who was really good at playing chess. So that's tech drag too. It's enacting the kind of traits of technology without actually being technology. And that's what DoxBox is. So there's a little graphic here, which again, you may or may not be able to see, which sort of runs through the process of what DoxBox is. It's a little kind of fake AI that lives in a box. I sit next to it as the operator. And it interacts with people and it asks them about the services and apps they use in their lives. And first of all, it can tell you where that data is going. It can tell you what information you're giving to those services, what information they infer from the information you've given them, how that data is correlated across different services. And then we go on to talk a little bit about how that information, particularly that inferred information which you haven't given them, may be wildly incorrect. Which again, like a really day-to-day example of that is how easy it is to mess up your recommendations on a service or a shopping service just by looking at something that you wouldn't normally look at, and suddenly like your recommendations are completely out of whack, as if you've become almost a different person to those services. So talking about kind of queerness and kind of non-conformity and the assumptions that a lot of these services make and the assumptions behind a lot of these technologies and services, tech bros. Here we see Elon Musk, in peak tech bro mode. A lot of these services, they will even actively claim to be morally neutral, or as if the age-old claim that if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. And it's very easy for people who are in a position of great privilege to say things like that, to say, well, I don't mind all my data being out there. I don't mind the things I do and everywhere I go being monitored. But the weight of this kind of system that we're in does not fall equally upon all people. It's easy for you to say, oh, I don't mind surveillance if you're a white person. If you're a bit browner, you have good reason to be concerned about being monitored, because people like you get profiled. People like you get picked up on surveillance systems. People like you can get confused with somebody else who just happens to be brown, which has happened. There's the infamous case in London of the police shooting a man who was they had an Asian man under surveillance. They ended up shooting completely the wrong person, who was Brazilian. The only thing they really had in common was that to those white police, they were brown. So, and also these the tech bro things, which is a thing I've often mentioned in a previous lunchtime lecture as well, so I won't go into it, but is this, the Palantir. They love giving themselves and their products these dystopian sounding names. Palantir is Peter Thiel's company, which deals in kind of predictive AI and policing and military applications, all of this stuff. And it's hard to tell whether they just think these things sound cool in their nerdiness, or whether they're like really actively aware of giving their products sinister names like Palantir or Gotham, which are both real ones. Again, there's this slippage. It's like, do they know they're Bond villains? Because that's basically what they are. It's just certainly in their behaviour and their attitudes. There's basically It's what they are. There's even a number of Bond films like View to a Kill, which is about a tech bro trying to literally murder all of his opposition and destroy Silicon Valley so he can have a monopoly. It's not dissimilar from the megalomania of real tech bros. Talking about landing on Mars or digging tunnels through the Earth or whatever it may be. So I'm going to get into some of the research I did over the time I was here. There's this, which is PRISM, which is the international surveillance infrastructure. And this graphic actually comes from Palantir, which shows, again, you're not going to be able to see this, but I went into like how these networks work. And all of us, this is the kind of association web of Peter Thiel, who I mentioned before, the investor. He's behind Facebook, and this web actually shows that he's behind lots of things, including Palantir, PayPal. He's connected to Elon Musk quite closely, LinkedIn, Facebook, the Trump White House, via various kind of investment vehicles and shell companies and all of these things. But the point is that somebody's done a web for Peter Thiel, but we all have these webs because we're all constantly surrounded by data. The data we make in the course of living our lives is constantly being correlated and siphoned. And so these systems, I mean, again, it's not really about individual people. It's not like the kind of Terry Gilliam film Brazil, where there's like some functionary sitting there monitoring your life. It's not really like the kind of old school kind of Stasi in East Germany, where you would have you would be assigned to an agent. This is all kind of going on in the cloud, and a lot of this doesn't have human oversight, and that's part of the problem, is that everyone everywhere you go, is being correlated and tracked, not necessarily by a human, but a human can access its data if they want to. And to me, that's one of the things that emerged from this research. This is a woman called Manal Al-Sharif, and by Western standards, what she's doing is pretty inoffensive. She's an activist for women being able to drive in Saudi Arabia. But she found that the same tools that she had been using to mobilize and organize other women in particular and male allies in Saudi Arabia, I'm going to read the quote from her here. She ended up leaving these platforms for her own safety to a large degree. She says the same tools that we joined for our liberation are being used to oppress us and undermine us, and used to spread fake news and hate. Twitter now is becoming a trap, and it's being used as a very efficient way by those governments, dictatorships and tyrants to silence us. And not only that, to spread their own propaganda, their own hate speech, misinformation and disinformation. So she was very clear that the same tools that were in some sense liberating her, and in a real sense were liberating her, and she accepts that. At the same time, if somebody puts their mind to it, they can be used to seriously oppress, and in some cases, harass, kill people that you don't agree with. So one of the early ideas I had was to build a system that would kind of replicate these sort of searches. Well, they're not searches. They're kind of ambient searches that are going on through all of the data that we create all the time. But I found that there was no point building it or researching it because I could just buy it. It's called Maltego, which is, again, it's a bit obscure. It's very hard to even Google this word. Eventually, I found out this strange connection that Maltego is it's the Welsh word for fog, which again is one of these kind of Bond villainy kind of things. It's like, did somebody do that on purpose? Are they creating fog or are they clearing the fog? It's kind of the kind of semiotics and the kind of the etymology of these things is really, really interesting to me. They choose these sort of sinister sounding names for things. But basically what Maltego does is, it creates these webs. It's like if they have your email address, they can work out from that what your other email addresses are, even if you don't use your real name with them. They work out they can see everything everybody that you've emailed. They see where you work, and they can pull out all of your work colleagues' email addresses and who they know, and so on. It's like I don't know. It's like the underbelly of social networking. It's I don't know what you call it, anti-social networking, because it's all kind of in the background, and it's generally the authorities, companies, people with a lot of power already that are leveraging this kind of information about you. Oh, it's got a bit of a formatting thing because it should have Japanese on it. So another thing that was interesting to me is like how good governments, companies, services are getting at masking authoritarianism with kind of the idea that they're providing you with a really great service and it's all fun and no harm is going to come to anybody. I like the Japanese aesthetic just because I do, but also because they are so good there at masking authoritarianism with cuteness. It's just so embedded. And this is the symbol. This is Pipa-kun, who's the mascot of the Tokyo police force. And there's a sign here where he's saying, the translation is, children, keep it safe. In other words, just call the police whenever you want to. Yeah, and there's this image too, which again, it's of a fighter. I think it's an attack helicopter actually, and again, you won't be able to see these very well, but it actually has a cartoon version of the pilot herself on the side of it. And this quote above is a really interesting thing that I discovered. The difference between Western and, broadly speaking, Eastern kind of services and apps is that simplicity has become the kind of accepted aesthetic of Western or Westernized apps and services. Whereas I came across this great quote that people in kind of Asia tend to not trust that simplicity so much. And there's this term, chaos is preferred. They like interfaces that are kind of maximal rather than minimal, which I thought was really interesting. So, yeah, that was the thing that came up in my research. We could have a utopia, not a dystopia. There were lots of hopes in the past. Tim Berners-Lee, who is one of the founders of the ODI, he created the idea of the World Wide Web in great hope that it would connect people, and it really has connected people. It's made huge differences and huge improvements to the quality of billions of people's lives, but it hasn't turned out quite as utopian as probably most people would hope. And we seem, in our culture and our societies as a whole, we've really lost that sense of hope in the future, I think, just because the future has collapsed onto the present. We've seen what the future's like, and the future is, the future's pretty crap, actually. The future's pretty dull in some ways. We're living through a very difficult time right now with coronavirus, and, who thought a worldwide pandemic could be so boring? But that's the reality we live in. So this was a keystone for me in developing all of my work, and this work in particular is Oscar Wilde's kind of somewhat famous quote of "all art is quite useless." But he goes on to say that art is useless in the same sense that a flower is useless, and actually a flower is not useless. A flower has a purpose. A flower is, and its beauty is a purpose. A flower is a plant sex organ, so a flower is actually quite beautiful, and I don't know, we could regard art, I guess, as the sort of sexual organs or other types of organs you might be interested in of culture. So to me, art is not useless. Art doesn't have to be useful. It can be, doesn't have to be, but I think art is at its best when it's kind of somewhere in the Venn intersection of useless and useful. So these are some early drawings for DoxBox itself. So you can see on one side, there was the idea that it would literally be a puppet, like a glove puppet, and you would have your hand inside it, and it was always going to have an animated face, which it still does. And you can see on the other side a slightly more, maybe a little bit more sinister, a little bit more Dalek-like, kind of totally mobile unit, which would have a person inside it and would move around. I did actually have a robot arm, which is in the exhibition at the ODI, just like hanging on the wall now, because it became redundant. But yeah, so this is a bit more like what it ended up being. But again, you can see it's got straps, and it was intended to just like go over your head, and you would walk around wearing it, and it would work like that. It still does have the handles. So this is the face I developed for it, which is normally animated. And if I was able to show video to you, I'd just show you a clip here, but this will do. It's, God, I've just noticed looking at myself, it kind of sort of looks a little bit like me in a weird way. Yeah, I think that probably is something that's probably common to a lot of my work, is that the egotism of artists is like you always end up in your own work somehow, even if it's not about you. I'm not this cute. But this was designed, again, with that Japanese aesthetic to be quite minimal, but also kind of have these very maximal kind of super cute eyes. And it will kind of, when it gets upset about things, it will kind of like get a tear in its eye and all of this stuff. It's quite melodramatic. So yeah, the whole kind of aesthetic of it is, it's like a kind of an East Asian kind of service, or an ATM or something similar to that. This is a screen where it's talking about you being an ethnic minority, and I was just, again, it goes to some quite dark places, but I wanted it to kind of make those things a little bit easier to deal with, but also to kind of satirize a little bit, like how these services really do gloss over very important issues, like how difficult it is to be an ethnic minority, with this kind of cuteness and this jollity of just, well, okay, hi, you're an ethnic minority, that's fine, we're all friends here. And it's more difficult than that in the real world. So one of the things that DoxBox does once it's interviewed you is a thing which I call Let's Imagine mode, which is where I did lots and lots of research with the ODI and with people who work there, to kind of talk about not just negative things, but the positive aspects of all this data being around us all the time. So I have lots and lots of real stories. They appear in DoxBox, trustbot in anonymized form. But they're all based on real stories. So DoxBox gives you an opportunity to hear some of those stories and to maybe think a bit about your own privilege, in terms of if you might think that DoxBox may have said to you, that your data's going off to Singapore, or maybe you're oversharing a little bit, which it will do sometimes, but some people are still fine with that. So if they are still fine with that, I want them to maybe not be so fine with that. So it will tell them a story which maybe will give them an opportunity to check their privilege a little bit and to think about how, if all their other circumstances were the same, but they happen to be, say, a women's rights activist in Saudi Arabia, or a gay man in kind of somewhere in the Eastern Bloc, your rights and your privileges would change pretty radically, even if nothing else in your life did. So that's what Let's Imagine mode is about. And at the end, that's it. At the end, you, if the DoxBox, in other words, myself, because I'm sitting there as the operator doing the emotional labor of this, which AI still can't really do. So the fake AI has decided that you have shared or overshared enough. You will win a trust credit, which is a kind of gold and pink credit card looking thing, which is 1 million trust credits, which you can exchange for some vaguely defined service, or sorry, I'm just looking down because I'm getting some questions, which I'll come to in a moment. Again, feel free, if you're on Twitter, do hashtag ODI Fridays. Somebody's monitoring that, or do them in the live chat here. So, and I'll see them here, and I'll see them on my one of the other numerous devices I've got here. So yeah, just send your questions and I'll get to them towards the end of this session. Yeah, so once you've won your trust credit, it's really up to you to negotiate with wherever the venue is to see if you can get anything for it. Okay, so yeah, and this is I hope they'll forgive me. This is a picture that I love from the ODI. This is two beautiful members of the ODI staff showing their love for the mannequin version of me as the DoxBox operator, which now lives at the Open Data Institute in London. So yeah, I think this is, and also this is interesting to show how embedded DoxBox was and is and remains in the Data as Culture program at ODI, which is their scheme to commission and support artists working with data as material. For lack of a better way of describing it. But it really is embedded in everything they do and in their thinking, and their thinking in turn becomes embedded in the work that we do as artists. So let me just see. There's a question here. Did I learn anything surprising from being DoxBox trustbot? Oh, okay. Yeah. So as I'm actually sitting there, it was kind of shocking and not shocking that people immediately forget that there's a human being there and they talk to the screen, they talk to the machine. I'm sitting there operating it quite blatantly, but people very quickly start treating it as a thing. I suppose it's akin to the fact that people like immediately and instinctively like swear at Alexa or tell voice assistants to shut up, or we anthropomorphize really readily. It's really part of us as humans. Just you stick eyes and a mouth on virtually anything, and it becomes kind of humanized really quickly and easily. But it's still, so I knew that already from my other work and from my reading and research in general, and just kind of theories. There's lots of kind of research and science that's been done on this, things like kind of supernormal stimuli and all of that kind of stuff. If you want to look that up, like seagull chicks react more favorably to a stick with 3 orange lines painted on it than to their real mothers, because it's triggering some kind of innate system in them. It's like a stick with lines painting on it is like a super mother, which is more appealing to them than a real mother. So we as animals and biological beings all have these things built into us. And in the case of humans, we respond to like big eyes and like a cute voice. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm interested in and kind of use / exploit a lot in my work. But yeah, anyway, yeah, even knowing all of that, it still shocked me that people instantly go to look at the screen and not at me. And they don't ask me things, they ask the machine things, even though there's obviously a real person there. Another one. Has it been anywhere controversial? No, not really. I'd love to take it. I mean, the way things are at the moment, I'd love to take it anywhere. I think it's true of all artists. We've all, we've been thrust into this new reality. So it's a tough thing to do at the moment because it's about it's a one-to-one performance which is tailored for that person and is about proximity. So this is an issue right now, but in theory, yeah, I'd love to take it out to places where it would cause a stir. I'd love to take it out to places where people with much less kind of knowledge of technology are going about their lives and their business. That's always been the ambition. I'd love to take it to places like a job centre, to take it out to places where people are trying to interface with these sometimes very, very frustrating technical systems. I'd love to take it out and do it at like Google headquarters, for example. I'd love to take it out to places where companies like IBM, Google, all these places are very proud of their in-house AIs. I'd love to like sit there and have DoxBox have a dialogue with these AIs, these real AIs. So yeah. Yeah, okay. I think we're kind of heading towards being done, I think, unless there's any more questions. You can always kind of leave questions after the live stream has ended. You're very welcome to do that. Um, Otherwise, I think I will keep this relatively short. I hope it's been interesting. I hope it's been informative. And otherwise, thank you very much for watching. And yeah, stay safe. Like they say in the kind of BDSM circles, keep it safe, sane, and consensual, whatever you're doing. And yeah, hopefully, DoxBox will be back out in the real world soon. So thanks a lot for listening, and goodbye. Yeah, I mean, remember to check out my Twitter stream. You can check me out. My name is Alistair. Alistairgentry. You can find me online. You can find me on Twitter. Yeah, ask me questions there at another time if you want to. So, okay, I think that will do for now. So, yeah, goodbye. Smash that like button. I've always wanted to say that. Yeah, do it. Yes, and somebody did. Excellent. Bye.